that's really, I really believe that's kind of the situation we're in, is that when we realize that no matter what the ex is able to do, no matter how they can manipulate the kids, how they can manipulate the court system, how they can turn people against you, at the end of the day, if you say, you know what, for F it, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to find my own peace, and I'm not going to allow you into my mind. I'm not going to allow you to corrupt what future I have left. They don't have much power left. Now they'll try. They'll try.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll try to mess with the kids, and they'll do all kinds of other things to try to do it. But if you can stay steadfast on that, they don't have any power over you anymore.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the philosophy in all of this healing is unbelievably simple.
Oh my God.
You know, it is it's so simple that it's unbelievable, you know, because of its simplicity.
I'll just say, it's funny you say that, because I know I've said that. I mean, I have over 900 videos and stuff, but I know I've said that in the past, that one of the things that really is a fundamental truth is this stuff isn't as complicated as it seems. It's almost as if you're in a jail cell, the door's shut, but it's unlocked, and all you have to do is open it and walk out.
On a train, in a bus, in a car, on the way to your job. All alone with your kids, with your wife, or with your dog. You can listen anywhere, you can listen everywhere, to the Philip Maloney podcast.
Hi, welcome back to the latest installment of the Philip Maloney podcast. I am over the moon to be joined by an almost a mentor of mine through the medium of YouTube. He's somebody that I've looked at his videos, and I reached out to him a few weeks ago and asked him to come on the Philip Maloney podcast. And here he is. His name is Duane Robert, and he is the YouTube owner, I guess, of Dad's Surviving Divorce, and here to have a conversation with me about his podcast channel, and to chew the fat for a little while on the Philip Maloney podcast is Duane Robert. Welcome, Duane.
Hey man, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It's always fun to have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it, actually. Like, as I said there, I've seen some of your work on YouTube, Dad Surviving Divorce, and yeah, I think just the way that you've applied your situation and your experiences and things like that, I think it reaches out to so many people, which is why you've got, you know, such a successful channel on YouTube, and I think it resonates with a lot of men out there who are going through divorce, and you seem to sort of almost flip the script a little bit as to what people want to do and what people should do. So, you know, how do you feel? Is that a fair description?
Yeah. The only thing I would add or offer, I mean, I've kind of shrunk the name down to DSD instead of Dad Surviving Divorce, because the channel is actually basically 50-50 split between men and women. And although I know, you know, my situation is from a man's perspective, there are a lot of similarities whenever you're dealing with toxic relationships and how they play out. Plus, I think it's good to have that mix of subscribers or viewers who offer different perspectives, so that you don't fall into the, you know, all women are horrible, or you know, the MGTOW view or whatever. And it helps you helps you find a pathway out of this, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, but you obviously started with the name Dad Surviving Divorce. So did you find yourself going through your own personal journey through the podcast?
Yeah, well, but here, and you kind of mentioned a little bit of it, but I just to I guess dovetail on it a little bit more. When I started this channel, I was probably 4 or 5 years into my divorce. I was doing pretty good. I'd learned a lot of stuff. Figured out how to navigate this nightmare. And one of the things that really drove me to do this is remembering how bad and how hard it was when I was in the middle of it. And I would look for people who understood what was going on, and most people didn't understand. And I would do the Google searches, and I would find these people who would post their stories online who are just like, it's horrible, it's terrible, it'll never get better, you'll lose your kids, you'll lose everything, you know. I mean, it was just this negativity that it's so easy to feed into, and just it makes things worse. And what I was hoping to accomplish with the channel at the beginning, and I think I've done a pretty good job on it, is to help people see that although this sucks, there is a way through this, that you don't lose yourself, and you can come out the other side with a decent life, and, you know, basically kind of rise from the ashes and not have this destroy your life. And I know anybody who's listening to this right now and who is early in their own process probably look at it and say, well, it has destroyed my life. There is no way out of it. And it's like a precipice, or you're at a crossroads, I guess is a better way to look at it. You can choose to go down the pit of darkness, the pit of hell, and just embrace the suck, or you can take a breath and look for a way out of it to make the most of this crappy situation and come out of it better and stronger. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think a real harsh reality, obviously, through divorce and through, you know, custody battles and parental alienation, etc., is a lot of fathers come to that crossroad and they go down, you know, the dark road. You know, they carry on down that avenue of self-destruction. You know, we do, you know, we can only hear about the ones that are still here, and the ones that are, you know, still sort of complaining or you know, or going down. Even if, you know, I suppose we've got to almost kind of be thankful that they're here to complain, right? You know, and that they're still making noise, and albeit need to just kind of get focused on you know, getting better and surviving, rather than going down that even worse track, you know, as we see so many people you know, ending their lives or becoming drug dependent or alcohol, and you know, heading down those avenues.
These situations are so devastating, and I think two things happen. You either go down and you follow this path, and it leads to your demise in so many different ways. And then oftentimes what happens is if you make it through it, I think a lot of men, I'll just say men for this particular example, they don't want to deal with it anymore. It's like they go through this hell, they've done it, they have the PTSD associated with it, it's behind them, they don't want to think about it, they don't want to talk about it, and they haven't healed from it. So if they run into somebody who's going through it, it's a flashback to what they went through, and they don't want to deal with it. And that was kind of, I mean, so it's kind of weird. I mean, I've been doing this channel for about 5 years, and I'll tell you, when I started it, I thought I was at the best emotional stage, or however you want to say it, of my life, that I was.
Well, yeah, the most resilient you could be, right?
Well, and I thought it was the best it was going to be. It's like, okay, I've hit the point, you know, like, okay, like if you get injured or something, you know, if you whatever, I mean, something happens, you break a bone or whatever, and you're starting to heal, there comes a point to where you can't heal anymore, right? I mean, you kind of like that physical wound is been repaired as much as it can, but the loss of what you've had is, it's just the new normal. And I thought that's where I was. But what I'll tell you is from actually it might be 5 years now, to be honest, that I've been running the channel, it's continued to get better. And I look back at who I was 5 years ago, and I was in a really good spot, but I'm in a much better emotional spot than I was back then, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, well, no, it makes total sense.
Like, well, let me just to finish that thought. What I was going to say is that a lot of people get away from it. I've continued to do this because I always remember back to those dark days, and there wasn't anybody out there to really help guide you through the light, right? Yeah. So, you know, I mean, it's one of those things. I get messages and emails from both men and women. You know, every few days I'll get a message saying, "You've literally saved my life." Yeah. And, you know, and I'll even get messages from, you know, people who is like, they'll say, you know what, you helped me through a dark time. I haven't, you know, I'm not a part of your channel anymore, but you had a profound impact on my life. And that just keeps me going. I mean, it can get tough sometimes. I mean, some of the stories aren't great, but I just wanted to clarify that. So
yeah, well, I mean, I can definitely I mean, I can't relate to obviously receiving any fan mail, but if you're out there, I would be happy to receive it. But but I can totally relate, because when I see your channel and when I see you, and even the way you speak and just the way you sort of conduct yourself with that real sort of center ground point of view around the situations, etc., and just sort of looking more into yourself as opposed to the things that you can't control in the peripherals or what have you. I definitely can understand and see why that drives you. So let's take the conversation to almost like a prequel. Okay, you're familiar with that term, right?
Yep.
Before Batman Begins and all the rest of it. Yeah. So
exactly.
So let's talk about Duane from his early days. I mean, this is something that I like to do with a few of my conversations that I have. I want to get to know, what was the childhood like? What was your environment, etc.? How was it? How was it growing up? What was your favorite toy growing up as a young lad?
That's a good question. So it's okay. Haven't been asked this, I don't think, ever. What I'll say on this is my childhood wasn't necessarily the most amazing time. And I think what happens a lot of time for people in these in situations that, well, I'm not sure about your situation, but like what I've ended up in, whenever you're raised in a toxic family, and my parents divorced early, and it was nasty.
Okay. That's interesting.
And I basically was alienated against my father for the longest time, and so I kind of grew up in this muck, which kind of primed me for later in life when I met my my now ex, that when the red flags went off, it just felt normal. So it wasn't one of those things to where it just was like, oh, this sucks. I didn't want it to be this way, but all situations are crap, and you just got to make the most of it. The result of a lot of the, I guess you could call it trauma that I dealt with when I was a kid. And this is a really good example, or a really good indicator of childhood trauma, is I don't remember much. I have fragments of memory of like little photographs. I'll talk to some people and they'll say, "Oh, I remember, all of this stuff when I was a kid," and I don't. And it's like as a defense mechanism, I blocked a lot of it out. Which I guess isn't the most exciting, way to talk about my childhood. Well, but it is what it is,
Yeah, Duane, that's extremely interesting to me, because I've just done a podcast on ACEs, which is adverse childhood experiences, and a lot of what you say is scientifically provable. I spoke with a very well, she's a good friend of mine. She's done a few podcasts now. Deborah Powney, who's studying at University of Lancashire, and she's writing her PhD around this. And there are things that happen on the DNA level through adverse childhood experiences that can affect you. And certainly one thing around sort of fight or flight suppression is very prevalent. So that's quite interesting. And I wouldn't have had you down as somebody who didn't have a sort of fulfilled normal childhood. I genuinely didn't know that you obviously had maybe adverse experiences when you were young. But please continue. That.
Well, what I would say on that is, I think one thing I've noticed with doing the channel, there's two kind of people. There's people who get ensnared by a toxic person because they pretend to be whatever you need them to be. But somebody who came from a healthy childhood without a lot of trauma will early on realize something's wrong, and they'll break it off. Now, they might have a child by the time they figure it out, but their relationships are generally shorter. However, people who have a history of childhood trauma will be in these relationships for decades. At least, long term. Like my situation, it was basically approaching 21 years before I finally just realized that I owed it to myself to at least see if life could be better, because life sucked and I was heading down a dark path anyways. And it was like, well, I got to roll the dice and see what happens. And it was a pretty scary thing to do.
Yeah.
But I mean, so let's see, getting back to my childhood, my parents divorced early on, I think around 10 years old. Like I said, it was a nasty knockdown, drag out, just battle. My mom was pretty toxic. She did an outstanding job of alienating me. Not my brother so much, but for me, I just kind of got sucked into well, someone has to take care of mommy. Someone has to,
What's the dynamics there? Are you the older brother or the younger brother?
I'm the older, yeah.
You're the older brother. So you were the person that she brought in to comfort her and to make sure that she wasn't.
Oh, but there was a ton of boyfriends and stuff. I mean, it was a can I swear?
Yeah.
It was a shit show. I mean, it wasn't good. And, I really wanted to have a relationship with my dad, but he did not have the skills or the support to deal with it. I mean, the problem is, especially back then, well, even now, right? I mean, if you start this process and you don't have a support group or support system that understands it, you're really at an emotional disadvantage. So, and a toxic person knows how to push your buttons. So they will get you to react in ways that will reinforce whatever the images they're trying to tell the kids are. Yeah. So you start to believe it. You got one person saying, the other person is, it's so sad that your dad's not a good, good person, and they get mad or whatever. And then they poke them, boop, right in the eye. And, your dad reacts in an angry way. Yeah. And then you're like, as a little kid, you're like, oh my God, wow, you're so right. I mean, it's just, it was weird. And one of the things I'll say is I was so starved for a father figure that I was looking for the longest time. Man, I haven't thought about this. For the longest time growing up, I was trying to find a replacement for my dad, somebody that could be that, not the crappy person that my mom was describing, but, somebody who would be this illusion that, I mean, it wasn't achievable, I mean, it was just, and it just made it a pretty tough experience. I mean, so shortly after the divorce, my brother wasn't buying into the, dad was a piece of crap thing. So he was fighting back with my mom quite a bit. Until she just finally dropped him off on my dad's doorstep. And, my dad at the time was like, well, at least I saved one, he couldn't get to me. But at the same time, I mean, I completely was like, well, I can't abandon my mom. I can't leave her or whatever. And I just bought into all the lies and the hype. My mom used to do really just cruel things like, oh, your dad's going to come by today. And I would, this is, way before cell phones. I mean, this is so for me, it would be like early 80s, if I remember. Well, like late 70s, early 80s. Mm-hmm. So, and I mean, I would just be sitting out in the window looking for hours, is he here yet? Is he here yet? Every car that drives by. I mean, it would be, anxious. And then I would just be an emotional mess hours later. It's like, well, why didn't he show up? Well, the reason he didn't show up is because he didn't know he was supposed to be there. She lied about it, but I didn't realize that until I was in my late 40s.
Oh my goodness.
So it was a good time.
Yeah. So your favorite toy was the curtains, I guess, feeling the fabric of the curtains.
When I was really young, I wanted to be a journalist. And then I kind of shifted from that into photojournalism. I wanted to be a news reporter. I dabbled with that and computers. But I was way on the track of being into photography, either commercially or for news. I mean, even to the point that, like, when I was in high school, I would befriend. Before we moved, at one point, we were in one town that I kind of grew up in, and then we moved up to the coast of California. I lived in California my entire life until the time I was in the military. But anyways, so I mean, I was really focused on that. But I mean, things just got bizarre when I was in high school, and I mean, it wasn't a good time. I mean, it was, when you're living with a toxic, unstable parent, and you don't know it, it's a nightmare. I mean, I was just basically hunkering down, just trying to get through it, just to get out of there. And I didn't even, it's like, I remember having those thoughts.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I didn't really understand what it meant, right? Because it's so hard for a child. And it's anybody who's going through this, if you have kids and your ex is a toxic, just piece of garbage, garbage human, I really feel for you, and I feel for your kids, because at the end of the day, that's the other kid's parent. It's their mom or their dad. And if you look at it, a lot of times it takes us a long time to realize what we're dealing with, but we just married into it, or we got, we had a relationship with this person.
Yeah.
But when it's your parent, it makes it so much harder, because you don't want to believe that this person, the one person in the world that you should be able to count on, doesn't really, is incapable of providing the love and support that you are expecting or hoping. Does it make any sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense, because in one aspect, they're probably teaching their child to be strong, independent, and to think for themselves, and on the other hand, they're saying, you're not strong, you're not independent, and you can't think for yourself. It's just such a weird complexity around, this is what society wants you to be, but this is what I want you to be. I want you to be, subordinate. I want you not to question anything that I say. And if you ask for daddy, that's just going to upset me, so you're in this weird, warped, like just almost like a parallel universe.
And I just want to pause on that, because you hit a really good point. And that's, especially if you have kids, they're going to feel a loyalty to, it's really weird, because they feel a loyalty to the toxic parent, and they'll play that narrative out, even when it's just, not completely, but that's what I always tell people. It's like, when the kids are just with you by yourself and it's been a day, if they calm down and they treat you the way you think they should, the normal relationship, you're doing okay. You got to be prepared for the Groundhog Day whenever they come over, and you got to be prepared for the day whenever they go back, the transition time, because it's really tough. But a lot of times, whenever they have a toxic parent, they're just programmed, or getting programmed to appease that person. And since typically the other parent isn't as, screwing with their mind as much, they don't play the same game with the other parent. So you're not seeing the same type of, like, what I mean is like, you'll see your child and they'll poke you in the eye, and you'll see them letting the other parent get away with anything. And you're like, what the hell's going on?
Yeah.
Well, it's because they feel safe with you, and they're trying to appease the other person. Because like you said, if it's not even that, if you say, oh, I want to see daddy, that they're going to fly off the handle. What it is, it'll be subtle and manipulative. It'll be like, dropping little things about, oh, it's, it'd be so nice if you had a better dad, or I mean, just really, really subversive, just, like incepting ideas into your head as a child on what to think. And it's just destructive. It's just really destructive.
Well, it tears families in two, right?
Yes, it does.
As David Bowie would say, it's like, we see it all the time. I think every single parent has got their own little, example or anecdote as to why one parent can do something which is, just abhorrent to their relationship with their children. And, we always question it. But, that said, we've got I suppose there's a million podcasts with the same tick over, kind of, I don't know, like argument around that, and I really want to look at solutions. I really want to look at how these things go. So as far as my podcasts go, I like to look at things like the family courts. They're enabling of these issues, because we can, here you are saying about, late 70s, early 80s. I've had people on my podcast who've had these dealings in the late 60s, early 70s, and they're going through the same sort of enablement with the family courts, where they say, look, my family's being ripped in two, and people just rubbing their hands going, oh really, is there some sort of problem happening?
Yeah.
Well, let us try and make that worse for you, and that just seems to be what's happening.
I do think it's gotten better. I mean, it's still not great, and the courts do enable this, but I mean, if you roll the clock back to the 70s, like when my parents were going through that, and I would imagine it's even worse for the people in the 60s. Back then it was dads lose, you don't get anything, you give all your money to your ex, you might get you're going to get maybe every other weekend until that gets interrupted and you don't get that anymore, and you're just going to suck it up, and you're either going to not survive it, or I mean, think about it. Back in the old days, the story was, people get divorced and the dad, that scumbag, would go off, marry someone new, and have a new family and ignore their other family. Well, now I'm sure you can relate to this too. I mean, now going through this, I understand why. If you divorced or if your wife divorced you and takes you to the cleaners and weaponizes the kids against you, one of the only choices you have is to say, okay, well, I have to pay the bill because they're going to throw me in jail if I don't pay child support and or alimony, and I'm just going to start over and do the best I can, and you end up building a wall around your kids because the kid doesn't realize that they've been weaponized, but you do. Yeah. I mean, so I mean, it's like one of those things. So what I'm saying is like back in the old days, you would get maybe every other weekend, you get the standard visitation. Well, now people are getting 50-50. 50-50 is becoming more common, or shared care. And whereas 15, 20 years ago, that wasn't even, I mean, you would have to battle it out in court, and your ex would have to be just a piece of garbage with so much evidence that they just had to give the kids to you.
Yeah.
Nowadays.
You or care. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're probably really considering care at that point.
And I think that I think partly, you are right. You go into this thing, into the family court situation now, and they don't really give a crap. I mean, they're like, yeah, whatever. Next, okay, you hate you. Yeah, you're both idiots. Boom, here's a rubber stamp and on the way. And the problem is somebody who's toxic can use that system just to crush you emotionally and financially and just burn time off the clock.
And character assassination is just prevalent, right? All you have to do is just say something, and then all of a sudden,
the good old smear campaign.
Oh, so. Yeah. They're pretty good. What I was going to hope to come back to, you mentioned that you were looking for a father figure, and then you mentioned that you spent some time in the military. Was there anything? Did you find something close to father figures in the military? Because I've never been in the military, but I would understand that it's kind of like a big family, and I don't know. Was there anybody there who came close?
Not really. I think after getting disappointed, when you put people on a pedestal, you just, and as I was growing up, that's what I would do. I would find, here's a coach, a soccer coach that, this guy seems pretty good. And I'd kind of like, man, that's what a dad's supposed to be. And then, that would fall apart. Or I'd find a teacher or somebody, and it's like, oh, wow, but everyone's human, right? Everyone has these faults. And I just constantly was disappointed. And what ended up happening in the military is I was trying to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my life. Things were not going super great. My dad did actually, when I basically got out of high school and was completely adrift in life, he basically let me stay with him for a few months and kind of got me back on track and introduced me to the Air Force recruiter, who I actually just hit it off with. He was a pretty cool dude, which most people don't get along with their recruiters. And, I had a plan. I was going to go in the military, get to work on my college, and all that. The problem is as I was going in the military, I met my wife / ex, and, she was the most beautiful butterfly I ever saw in my life. And I was, the Venus flytrap was in full effect, and I got sucked in, so, now the military, it was a good experience. I don't regret it. I think it's helped me out in life. The crazy part is I was so emotionally broken by the time I got to that point. I had literally put my cameras down, and my goal of doing the photography and the photojournalism thing, I lost my passion for that, and I just went in. When I went into the military, I should have went in to do audiovisual stuff, but I just tested high enough for electronics, and I said, well, okay, I'll be a radio electronic repair person, and did that. And it was, it was an interesting experience. The one thing I'll say, what I really liked about it is it felt like I was doing something for the greater good. I mean, I know different people might have different opinions on that with military and its primary focus, but it was, when I got out of the military, I got out of the military in like 99. I worked for a contractor for a couple of years, and it just wasn't, it was like, man, I mean, what am I doing? I'm chasing a dollar, and I had an opportunity to go back and work with the military as a civilian. And it's you're working on missions and objectives, and it just kind of gives you a purpose, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, that must have been an interesting. Did you manage to travel through that time, or was that all domestic?
It's funny you say that, because I mean, okay, so anybody who watches my channel, maybe you think that I'm an extrovert. I am not. I'm an introvert. I had a lot of anxiety from growing up and stuff, so change kind of freaked me out. So when I joined the military, I wanted to go nowhere other than the United States. And initially, it's kind of a funny story. Initially, they're like, okay, you're going to go to Alaska, and I'm like, all right, it's not the contiguous United States, but okay, it's still the U.S. I'll be okay. And right before I left, this is a funny story. So I had my orders for Anchorage, or whatever the base is up in Alaska. And then I heard from some buddies who said, hey, everyone's orders have been canceled. They're not going. So I rushed over to the military personnel flight and said, hey, what's going on with this? And they're like, what? They're just messing with you, clickety clack, clackety click, and they're like, oh crap, you're not supposed to know that yet. I'm like, oh crap. So a month later, I think it's about a month later, I get, in the orderly room, that have a little box with my name on it, and I pull it out, and there's just RIP. And I look at it, and it says, assignment notification or whatever, and it says that I'm going to Moron, Moron, ABSP. And I'm like, Moron Air Base, what is it, South Philly? What the hell is this, right? I've never heard of. It's Marsone, by the way, in Spain.
Oh, wow. Right.
So I grabbed that, ran over to MPF. I'm like, what is this? And they're like, Maroon? I don't even know if they called it. They might have said moron too. I thought it was a joke. I thought somebody was playing a joke on me.
Yeah.
So they look it up. They go clickety click, clackety clack, and they're like, wow, yeah, that's legit. And I swear to God, this like old crusty civilian comes walking through. I don't know what he was there for. And he's like, Maron Air Base in Spain. I thought they closed that in 52, So I ended up, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I call up the airman, airman support flight or whatever, where they have sponsor packages and stuff for all the bases. And I said, hey, do you have anything on this base called Moron Air Base SP? And they're like, what? And they're like, hold on a second. They look through the thing, and they're like, holy crap. Yes, I have one packet on that base. I'm like, I'm on my way over. I zipped over there. So it was basically, I got sent to Moron Air Base. That's right outside of Moron de la Frontera, which is about an hour out of Sevilla, and in the Andalusia area of Spain, wow, if I remember correctly. And that's where I went. So I basically got sent to Spain, which I loved it there. It was a 2-year assignment.
Some beautiful country by the sounds of that location.
And it was a tiny base. It was an abort site for the space shuttle. And it was a forward operating base if we went to war, which about a week or two, or about a month after I got there, Desert Shield and Desert Storm started. So we went to war. But I liked it. It was a cool base. The people were cool. When I got there, there was only like 30 Air Force people on the base. So the locals in the economy, I mean, the Americans hadn't ruined it. So, we were embraced with open arms. And
how long were you there for?
I was 3 years. I extended a year. So I was there from 90. I got there in like August of 1990, and I left in, or maybe it was June. anyways, I remember when I left, I wanted to be back in the United States for the 4th of July. So I think I must have got there in July. No, I got there in July of 90 because that's your DROS, your date of or your entry or whatever. So that's whenever you end up going back. So I was able to go back, and I got back on the 1st of July of 1993. So
wow.
Yeah, it was cool. I mean, Spain, I don't know if I like Spain. I used to, granted I was married I was with my ex at the time. So that lovely experience was just starting.
Spain is a very cool place. Obviously that's a very short hop from where we are here in the UK, but
it was not a short hop. That was a long flight. Oh my God. And we flew into Rota. It took a military aircraft into Rota. I don't remember what else is around. I don't know if there's a town called Rota or if it's just a Navy base. And then
I'm not overly familiar with the the only thing that sparked for me whilst you were having that conversation is just through a friend of mine, I met a journalist called Chris Morris, and he's a journalist that uncovered a US, I think there was a US base in Spain, and there was a nuclear incident. So I don't know if that had anything to do with Marsone Air Base.
Yeah, actually, if I remember correctly, it was Marsone. That was like in the 50s, right? I mean, that was.
I don't know if it was the 50s.
Well, maybe not 50s, but it was a long time
60s,
ago.
70s, yeah, possibly.
I think it was a B-52 that crashed, if I remember correctly.
That's right. Right. Yeah. So was that like a little tale of the Marsone Air Base? Was there?
Yeah, people heard about it. I mean, I remember someone telling me that story. I tell you what was amazing is that Marsone has a really long runway. That's why it was an abort site for the shuttle. So if the shuttle, there's a period of time when back in the days, whenever we had the space shuttle, if something went wrong and it needed to abort, that was one of the places it could land. So it had a long enough runway that if it was intact enough to land, that it could, during a certain window of time, it could land there. But what it also made it good for was fully loaded B-52s. So during Desert Shield and Desert Storm, we had B-52s just loaded with armament. And every morning, it was crazy. I mean, I remember, I'd be at work, 20-year-old Duane, and you just watch like 8 B-52s fully loaded take off. And then, if you ever seen a B-52 take off, they kind of they take off in a weird angle, kind of like, instead of like most planes kind of go up, it kind of goes like this. It's just really bizarre. Yeah. And then they would take off, and then basically a tanker for every one of them would take off right behind it to refill, to fuel them back up. So they would fly out, do their thing over Iraq, and then come back. It was a crazy time.
Oof. Of course, yeah, that would have, that's a. I think I was probably just at high school around that time. Around was that the first Iraq War?
Yeah.
First one. So that was all about the oil fields and things like that. Sortie after sortie, and then the next one they went back in for Saddam, right? And that was
after 9/11.
Yeah,
so I think if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Wow.
I was already out at that point.
That
was a weird day. 9/11 was a weird day.
Yeah. Where were you?
I'm in Southern California in the desert near a base, and it was weird. I remember getting a phone call. I was kind of running a little bit late, so I was getting up, and I get a call from one of my guys, and he basically says, "Hey, Duane, I'm going to be running, or I'm out today. I got to go to the VA down in Los Angeles. Bad day to be going out with everything that's going on." And I'm like, "Well, that's weird." So I was brushing my teeth, and I went around, turned on the TV, and the towers were on fire, and I saw, I can't remember if I saw one of the planes hit it. I think I saw the second plane hit it. And it was just like, holy crap. And I remember just getting my stuff together, beelining to work. And then basically a few minutes after maybe an hour or so after I got that, we have these things called a force protection condition. And we went into Delta, which locks the whole base down. I mean, you remember, they locked down the airspace, they locked down every base. I mean, it was the only good part about that day is I was locked in a room with no TV. So I didn't get to watch, 18 hours of just the carnage. So I was kind of spared that, I guess. So
yeah. I was absolutely fascinated by it. Absolutely fascinated by it. In fact, I spent a lot of my divorce time dedicated to 9/11, just
wow.
looking at so much, just pulling as much sort of YouTube resource as I possibly could around 9/11. It was definitely one of those. I think, I mean, I don't know if I certainly don't speak for everybody, but for my divorce case, I found myself on YouTube a lot, going into weird places, little dark, little back alleys of, like, is that right? Is that shape on Mars? Is that a bunker? Is that and then like all these weird sort of like pseudo
Well,
scientists,
you,
professors, like,
you got to find a way to cope, right? I mean, your
yeah,
reality is so screwed up when you're going through a toxic divorce that you have to find an escape. And
yeah. I mean, there was so much fuzz. There was
oh
so
God,
much fuzz that
yeah,
out of the fuzz, I found things like meditation. I found things like Jordan
that's
Peterson.
awesome.
I found things like, accountability, responsibility. There was some real, but it was a fun journey to get there. Let me say, as
Now,
Pete's,
right? It wasn't probably so much fun going through it.
yeah. I mean, at the time, it was just like, I don't even have a concept of how to quantify it by time. I couldn't tell
Yeah.
you how long it was. It was just it was a thing. I couldn't say it was from that date until that day, and then from that day I started to sort of like, rise out. It might have been a year, it might have been 6 months. I don't know. I just don't know.
It's these situations are so rough. I man, I mean the early stages for me were just, I mean, were super dark. I mean, it just felt like everything was turned against you. I mean, it's like every day it was a new landmine would go off, and it was just like it was just never ending. I mean, it was just, I honestly, the way I got through that time is I realized that if the ex could end me, it would be like winning the lottery because of benefits and stuff like that,
Right.
Social Security, all that kind of stuff. And I just got to the point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to continue to breathe. I mean, it was out of anger and it was out of spite. It was like, I am not going to give up. You are not going to break me. And I'm going to be just here, and
Yeah.
I'm not going to let you win. And there were times where it would get so bad. And my coping mechanism is I would just sleep. I mean, I would just, I mean, I was severely depressed. Everything would trigger me, give me basically emotional flashbacks. I mean, I swear to God, man, I could watch a commercial that had a family in it, and if it was an intact family, I would have an emotional breakdown. If it was, I mean, it could be positive, negative, it didn't matter. I mean, it was so painful and so difficult to get through. I mean, I ended up doing a lot of therapy, and I mean, just searching for anything I possibly could to help me get through it. And there wasn't a lot out there, man. I mean, that's the really scary part. Because like I said, if I did searches on, on this stuff, I remember this one time, I think I was looking, I just was doing some Google searches, and this I don't remember who it was, but this guy came up, and his video was just him talking about how bad his life was and how his ex had ruined him and taken everything away and ruined his retirement and ruined his life and ruined his relationship with his kids, and I'm just like, oh my God, man. I mean, how do you get up in the morning whenever, this person has destroyed everything? And I felt that. I mean, when I was going through it, that's the way it felt. It felt like I had lost everything. And I did. I mean, I've lost a lot, but it was just
not everything.
Well, I'm trying to remember. There was a movie, I can't remember the name, but I remember there was a scene in a movie once where, basically a defiant person was basically saying, they're being whatever attacked or whatever, and it's like, you may have won, but you haven't broken me, and you're not going to break me. And and I used to just think of that, and I'm just like, okay,
similar to a scene in Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, I haven't seen that, but
Well, you have to watch Shawshank Redemption, but he's in solitary confinement, and he comes out, and they're like, how did you do, like, I don't know, what, 6 months or 3 years of confinement. They said, well, I had it was like I had a like a classical artist, in, like, say, Beethoven, for argument's sake. He said, I had Beethoven with me, and then one of the other prison guys goes, oh, they let you tote that little recorder down with you? He's like, no, it was in my head, right? So he still had his mind.
Yeah.
He still had his,
well, that's the thing,
he could go wherever he wanted to.
The reality is that if you can persevere through this and you don't allow this to break you, you can reset your life and come out the other side and be a happy person and find peace and find calm and find, just joy in the simple things. Like I think we were talking about before we started this. I mean, I just did a camping trip solo by myself, went up to the mountains, and just sitting on the bank of a river, just drinking some coffee it's like a weight coming off of you. And the reality is if you can find those little things that your ex can't take away from you, then they don't have any power over you anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I made a video about this a while back. If you've seen have you ever seen the movie The Labyrinth with David Bowie?
Yeah, a long time ago. I was quite young, but I remember
a kid movie.
Yeah, I remember really liking it.
There's a scene at the end of it, right? I mean, so you got David Bowie, who's the Goblin King, and you got Sarah, who's trying to save her baby brother.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of it, she has this epiphany that the only reason this saga is continuing is because she's giving the power to the Goblin King. And at the end, she basically says, you have no power over me, and everything just breaks apart and she ends up back home. And that's really, I really believe that's kind of the situation we're in, is that when we realize that no matter what the ex is able to do, no matter how they can manipulate the kids, how they can manipulate the court system, how they can turn people against you, at the end of the day, if you say, you know what, for F it, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to find my own peace, and I'm not going to allow you into my mind. I'm not going to allow you to corrupt what future I have left. They don't have much power left. Now they'll try. They'll try. Yeah. I mean, they'll try to mess with the kids, and they'll do all kinds of other things to try to do it. But if you can stay steadfast on that, they don't have any power over you anymore.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the philosophy in all of this healing is unbelievably simple.
Oh my God.
It is it's so simple that it's unbelievable, because of its simplicity.
I'll just say, it's funny you say that, because I know I've said that. I mean, I have over 900 videos and stuff, but I know I've said that in the past, that one of the things that really is a fundamental truth is this stuff isn't as complicated as it seems. It's almost as if you're in a jail cell, the door's shut, but it's unlocked, and all you have to do is open it and walk out. But it's so simple that you will never think to just open the door and walk out.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, I mean, if anybody's watching this or listening to us talk and they're in the darkness and the suck, if you want to call it that, just persevere through this, slow yourself down. And a couple years down the road, you're going to look back and go, holy crap, these two guys online having that podcast were absolutely right. And holy cow, one day it just clicked and your life just turns around.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I mean, did you have a moment when you found that? I mean, I certainly did, through my experience, but did you have anything where you were, you had this sort of epiphany, you were like, oh.
Well, it was a two-phase thing. Because like I said, I was going through I was going through a downward spiral. Things were getting really bad. I was doing therapy once a week. I mean, I was even, my therapist was trained in EMDR, eye movement, decent, rapid, whatever. I can't remember what it stands for, but it's a technique to help you deal with PTSD. And that didn't even, we tried that and it was just it was too much. But so what happened, it was two parts. One was I woke up one day and I just couldn't, I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Right. I mean, it's like I hit emotional rock bottom. And I just was like, man, I can't keep thinking about the ex. I just can't keep ruminating about stuff. And just, I mean, like I had this journal that's got hundreds of pages in it. Well, I haven't looked at it in a long time, but I mean, for the most part, it was just every day me just writing the same thing over and over and over again. I mean, you know, and I remember the thing that was kind of the epiphany is I remember sitting down with my therapist, and let me just say something on this. You know, okay, I'm 50 years old now, so I was going through this late 40s. I thought therapy was a bunch of witch doctors. It was stupid. I wasn't a real big proponent of it before. It was just things had gotten so bad that I was just trying anything I possibly could to find a pathway through this. Mm-hmm. And I remember one day I was actually getting to the point where I was even considering stopping therapy because it was like, what's the point? You know, I mean, this is just, I'm going in saying the same thing and it's not accomplishing anything. And I had a really awesome therapist. So when I was having that, when I was in that mode, what would happen is I would go in thinking I would cancel it, and then we'd have some type of breakthrough, and I'd be like, okay, I'll go again. But anyways, the epiphany was one day my therapist said to me, he goes, you know, I can't diagnose your ex because I haven't treated her. I've only talked to her. You know, I think maybe she talked to her one time, and she had been working with me for a couple of years. So she goes, okay, so I'm not diagnosing your ex. However, you are exhibiting all the behavioral traits of somebody who has been a target of somebody with narcissistic personality disorder. And I remember whenever she said that, I was like, it kind of irritated me. I'm like, whatever, okay, fine, you know. And I went home, I pulled out the Google, you know, clickety click, clackety clacked, and I was like, holy hell! It was, I swear to God, it was a picture of my ex. I mean, just everything they said, the behaviors, what they do, how it works. The next thing I typed in is, how do you co-parent with a narcissist? And it was like, you can't. And I was like, my God, this is my life. This is exactly what I'm dealing with. And that was kind of the epiphany where things started to turn around, because I felt like I finally had some answers and I finally had some closure, I guess, if you could call it that. And that was when things started turning around for me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's, the clickety click, clickety clack. When you see it, and that person is like, they're a little bit like this, and they're always going to be like that, and they're always going to have this to say, and you're always going to be viewed like this, and then you just go click, tick, 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 and you see crazy. You see those people, and it happens over and over and over and over again. Exactly the same for you, exactly the same for me, exactly the same for the next person.
Well, I get comments all the time saying, "Oh my God, you know, were you married to my ex?"
Yeah.
You know, I'll even have women sometimes going, "Oh my God, I'm a woman, and you're describing exactly what I'm going through." You know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, I tell you, there are, you know, I mean, this is not gendered. This is not gendered, you know, which is why I think the disparity comes when the family courts get involved.
Oh, yeah.
You know, an external source gets involved and has to make a decision, has to go kind of like, you know, you do dips, right? You know, when like people like dip for, you know, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and what have you. You know, it's like somebody just has to dip as to who's going to be the person who's perceived as right, and you know, the other person just goes, nah, 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 nah. You know, I was right because I said that one little thing about you, and you know what
think. What I find amazing, and it's so sad that the family court does this, because when they pick the toxic person, they use that control. They use that power as control.
Yeah.
And
they completely misinterpret it.
Right.
Then you don't have a judge. You don't have a judge there for every instance. Go, hang on, I'm going to talk to the judge the way you're interpreting this.
Right. And what ends up happening is then they start slowly interfering with your time and playing these stupid games. Whereas if it was the other person, you wouldn't do that. You know, if your child's, you know, parent said, hey, I want to go do, you know, hey, this thing's come up. Can I take little Susie to go do it? We would say, of course, sure. What time do you want to do it? You know, I mean, whereas on the flip side, it's like, hey, there's this thing and I want to take little Susie. Well, that's my time. Nope, won't do it. You know, I mean, it's like the NO answer, when they have the power to do that, they will exercise it for malicious reasons, and it hurts you and it hurts the kids, and it just makes a situation that doesn't need to be as stupid, right? I guess what I'm saying is, and I'm sure you may have had this epiphany yourself. Well, go ahead.
You covered it in your last. Well, I was going to say you covered it in your last podcast, I believe. You know, when you were sitting out there with the lights and stuff, and you covered it really well, because you said, look, you know, don't go tit for tat. Don't go toe to toe. If they don't want to let you, you know, do something with the daughter outside of their time, you know, and then when it comes to that opportunity, you know, you don't have to kind of you don't have to go no back. You can, you know, if you can do it, you know, because the child's view is going to be paramount. But also, I don't know if you said it in the video in there, is don't expect because you did it for them to do it. You know, don't expect
if
that.
I didn't say it, you're absolutely right. That if you do something nice, it'll be used against you. It won't be reciprocated.
Yeah. So if you say, oh, look, you know, I let, you know, little Johnny go to, you know, that soccer game with you, and I wasn't involved, but it was on my time or what have you. So therefore, it's just not, it's never, ever going to work like that. And they're never, ever going to see it that way.
That's why in that particular video, what I towards the end of it, what I tried to say is, you know, you got to look at it as in, I mean, it's all double binds, right? Because you know, whenever you give time to the ex, and then you can look at it that you're empowering them. The way you have to do it is you have to look at it, okay, if it's important to your kid and they're excited about it and it doesn't cause you a problem, enable it. You know, I mean, allow it to happen. I mean, if the kid doesn't want to go, and, you know, like, I don't really want to go, and, you know, then you could potentially say no. You know, and then if you have a conflicting thing, and they're, oh my God, these people are phenomenal at doing that, is that if you have something going on, they'll come up with this conflicting thing, convince the child that that's what they want to do. So now you have something you were going to plan to do, and now they go, but I want to do this with mommy. And, you know, and you're like, well, crap, we were going to do this. And it's just, bottom line is going through this, you're going to be stuck with a bunch of double binds. And what that means is every option sucks. You know, you don't have, you know, there's not an option that's like, oh, this is just, you know, this is great. It's not. You're going to be stuck in a situation where you're going to be having to make the best decision out of a choice of bad decisions, if that makes any sense.
Well, it does. It does make sense. But I don't dispute it, but I would say that there's an easier way to find the solution to your double bind, and that's just consider the child. You know, if you can consider the child and how that works for the child, you can relieve yourself of the double bind very easily by justifying it to that degree, where you say, okay, it feels like this for me, and it feels like a bitter pill to swallow. How does it feel for little Johnny? You know, does little Johnny want to do this? Are they gonna, you know? And then that way it takes so much away from, you know, you can get a lot of solace from that.
Well, I absolutely agree with you. However, I just got a comment on a video. I was reading it earlier today, and a person might even been on that video, and it was like, you know, well, you're just giving up and you're compromising on everything. That's not, you know, and you can tell they're still in that mode to where you're trying to fight everything and you're trying to get justice. And it's weird because it's a fine line. And just to be clear, you know, these, and I'm sure you probably feel the same way. These epiphanies I've had 9 years ago, I was not able to make that decision. Yeah. Right. I mean, if I was so angry and so frustrated and trying to establish a boundary and trying to get the ex to have some justice for the just shenanigans that were happening, So I had to go through that process where I beat my head against the wall out of frustration, trying to, you know, like, somebody listen, you know, and trying to get the ex to realize that she's being a complete POS human and being a bad parent, and just like, stop, you know, just compromise, just co-parent. I mean, just, and they can't. And what ends up happening is you can beat your head against the wall for the rest of your life, and destroy the rest of your life, or you can get to the point like what you were just saying, where you get to the point to where you realize, okay, you know, this person is messed up. There's not much you can do. So how do you make the best of the bad situation? And what you just said is what I try to tell people is, look at how it affects the kids and try to gauge your decision off of that. Now you got to be careful because, you know, every time that they have more time, I mean, it's just the kids end up starved for breadcrumbs of attention and love from a toxic parent. And they'll chase that to the end of the world. So, you know, I mean,
they want that fixed.
I mean, so even when you compromise and you allow things to happen, like even in that video I was discussing that, there's a cost, right? I mean, it hurts. It is going to negatively affect your kid, you know, in the short term. But I mean, it's like, how do you make the best of the bad choices? So
because unfortunately, the modus operandi for a toxic parent is to take everybody down. Okay, so you can see that it's affecting your kid adversely, but unfortunately you're not in contact with that child, and maybe you're not the main carer of that child, and they are being weaponized. But that's not your fault. You know, it's your fault if you enable the weaponizing, but it's not your fault if you do things in the best interest of that child where you think that that's still a further manipulation, because you've got to make sure that you're, you know, whiter than white in that respect, because my epiphany revolved around accountability and responsibility and my own self, you know, and fundamentally applying that to myself. You know, you mentioned there about going to counseling and things like that. What I found, you know, very early on in counseling is the best counselor will, you know, it's like the best salesperson. The best salesperson is the person who you don't know they're selling to you. You know, it's not obvious, but they're steering you down this path. They're steering you down this path of where actually you're making decisions and you're selling it to yourself. You know, so, you know, it's a case of, you know, I mean, that's the best salesperson. It's not the person who goes, hey, you know, that's not the best salesperson. That's the most obvious salesperson. Okay. But the best salesperson is the one that you don't know that they're selling to you. Okay. So in regards to the therapy, what I found is the therapy is within me. All right. They're not going to do anything other than listen to you. Okay. So if you just listen to yourself and talk to yourself and understand yourself and, you know, hit those solutions within yourself, it might take a little bit of time talking to a therapist to do it. But then all they're going to do, a good therapist, all they're going to do is they're going to go, well, now you need to find, now that you've told me that, thank you for sharing, you now need to find the solution. And that's the bottom line. You've got to find the solution. You've got to find it within yourself, and you've got to try not to destroy yourself in the process. So once you get on board with that kind of concept, you can then start looking at actually what's important here. You know, am I just chasing my tail because she's got me running around on all this bullshit about how I'm a deadbeat, or I don't do this, or I don't do that. You know, that's somebody else telling you that that's what you're like, right? So you need to now go, stop, hang on. Can I just tell me what I'm like? Actually, I like myself. I'm a good person. I've got a nice heart. You know, I'm really respectful when I go to the shop and I meet the shop clerk and I say, hello, good morning. You know, so you telling me what I am.
It's so funny you say that, because, and I haven't made a video on this in a while, but self-validation is so important. As a society, we are programmed to gauge our self-worth off of external forces, off your job, off of your family, whatever. And when you finally make the pivot with what you're just talking about, and you realize, you know what, I'm a good person, and I don't need anyone else to tell me I'm a good person. And if someone tells me I'm a crappy person, I'm grounded in my foundation, and I know who I am. And when you do that, your life starts improving. And then once you get to that point, then you start evaluating people who are in your life, and you start saying, these people they don't deserve to be around me anymore. And then finally what happens is you start having good boundaries. So, like, for instance, me going up to the mountains by myself, a lot of times whenever we're early in this, doing something by yourself scares the crap out of you, and you don't want to do it. Yeah. So you get to the point where you're like, you know what, at the end of the day, if it's just me, I'm okay. So if I'm with somebody who makes my life complicated, you then are empowered to be able to say, hey, honey, or whatever, we need to work on this, because this is a deal breaker. And you're not scared about, like, for me, for 2 decades, I was scared of losing the relationship. Yeah. So I wouldn't have boundaries. I wouldn't say, look, this is a line in the sand, because I was afraid that it would destroy the relationship. But when you get to the point that you're talking about, and I'll ask you this, I know it's your show, but I'll ask you, I would imagine you're in the mode now that if you're with somebody, and if they are bringing you down, and you'll try to work on it with communication, and if not, peace out. I'm not, I am not going to live like this anymore. Right. I mean, it's empowering.
Well, absolutely. I mean, one of the best things that I have about my relationship right now is that I'm with someone who I know really listens. And that's so important. I just found that, like, I was like, oh my God, I've monologued at her before, and she's just looked at me and gone, it makes sense. Yeah, we're going to do it like that now. That's funny. Because, she's got kids, and I've got kids, and in relationships, I've made mistakes. Yep. She's made mistakes. And we just sort of put down this, like, really nice, sweet, simple agreement as to what we want. And that was, I want the best for her, but I'm not responsible for her. She needs to she needs to want that for herself too. Yeah. Okay. So she needs to want me in her life, as much as I want her in my life. Okay. And there's no sort of like, oh, you're here and I'm here, and you're there and I'm there. There's no bullshit. There's no bullshit around it. We just want the same thing for each other. We just want each other to be well and happy and all the rest of it. And, as long as we sort of keep going down that avenue, the communication is, it's a constant, right? You always have to communicate, Yeah.
Yeah. But have real communication, right? I mean, you can't just be talking to a brick wall, vice versa, either way, because it's crazy. Yeah. It's amazing.
No, it's so good. And the kids flourish from it as well, because they see us at a really good level, and because they've been in relationships where they've been, where it's kind of, it's a bit more turbulent, should we say?
Oh yeah.
So so they like it. They really thrive off it. And we just want that to expand out, really. But it's a really interesting time, especially with sort of like multiple sort of families coming together and things like that.
Well, one thing I'll say on this is, I've seen this with a lot of people, and a lot of people I've talked to, and who are farther along with this, is that we go through these traumatic relationships that are just completely destructive, that nearly destroy your life. But when you do the work and you come out the other side, life is so much better, because, like, what you were just talking about, right? I mean, you have a better understanding of who you are. You have a better understanding of what your boundaries are, what you're going to compromise on and what you're not going to compromise on. And it changes your life in a way that makes it so much better than I have a thing where I'll say sometimes that my worst day now is equivalent to like my best day when I was in that marriage. And then the worst day, the bad days then were really bad. So
yeah,
it's one of those things that until you've been through this, you don't really understand it. And a lot of times when I bring that up, or if I have somebody on and I'll actually ask that question about that, because I'm pretty much, because it's a trend, right? You'll see somebody who's been through this, and on the other side of it, their life is just so much better. But my point is that somebody else going through it, it's like, it seems like it's a billion miles away, and that there's no way to get there. But I'm telling, anybody watching this, listening to your podcast, do the work on this, and your life is going to be different. It's not going to be the image that you saw whenever you were, first in this relationship with this person, but it can be so much better than you ever even imagined, if that even makes sense. I know you can understand that, but
yeah. No, well, yeah, sure, I totally understand that, and I think one of the things that springs to mind as you say that, because obviously we're not scripted, right? This is all just off the top of the dome. But as far as finding that, looking ahead and being okay and all the rest of it, one of the things that I find, because I speak fondly of my partner, obviously I would, but I don't know if we're going to be together for forever. But the thing is you have to be in a position where that doesn't matter. That doesn't become a consideration.
Absolutely.
So if I'm considering what's going to happen tomorrow, well, then I'm kind of dropping the ball on what's happening today. And if I'm happy with myself today, then I've done it. That's it. That's okay. That's all I can do. So if it doesn't work out for me tomorrow, then I know, one of the things when I make a decision, say I've got a tough decision to make, like a mortgage, or how to talk to somebody very important, or what have you. One of the things that I do is I go out for advice, right? And then I make sure that I make the decision. Like, I don't go to somebody and say, what do you think I should do? And then sort of like take that as what I do, because what I need to do is, if it fails, I need to be the one who made the decision. I need to be the person who pressed the button on that decision, and not somebody else, because I've done it where somebody else has pressed the button on a decision and it's gone wrong. And I've just gone, oh,
yeah,
shit. I feel bad, and I hate that person now. Do you know what I mean? Because they gave me the wrong decision. I need to make that decision, whether it's right, whether it's wrong. So I need to make sure that, if I can just love myself, and if I can make sure that I'm doing the right thing for myself, tomorrow is almost like a foregone conclusion, right? I'm going to be okay tomorrow. If I can do that, if I can make sure that I'm okay, mentally and emotionally. I've got to keep working on physically, I do have to say that, because I'm not physically right there, but mentally and emotionally, I think as long as I follow that that methodology, things for the future will be what they are. They're going to be what they're going to. I might cross the road. I might get knocked over. Right? Might get cancer. Okay.
Let me ask you this. I'm curious, because what you're saying, and I agree with you. I'm completely on board with you. But 10 years. Well, okay. I gotta get my time frame right. So let's say 15 years ago, if we were having this conversation, in the back of my mind, I would be thinking, man, you are out of your you and your woo-woo, BS, pie in the sky. And I'm curious, 10 or 15 years or whatever, take the time frame before you really had your epiphany. Yeah. If you were having this conversation, would you think that the other person lost their mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I would. I would look at people who were divorced and think, oh, shame, they couldn't, they are deficient. They are unable to hold down a relationship. They're unable to because I had both my parents. I was lucky enough, like the opposite, my mum and dad, their mistake was being too kind. They were too kind, right? What a mistake to have, Anglo-Indian sort of upbringing. They were just all for the kids. They
Wow.
sacrificed themselves completely for us little shits. There's 5 of us, right? So they were like, I've thought about it. I processed it. I thought, well, what is it about my mum and dad that have made me to be so like blind to narcissism? And I've sort of narrowed it down to say they were too kind. So when I look at myself now, growing up, you just did things and things just worked, until I then realized that actually, the woo-woo moment
Yeah.
was really only when I had to actually start looking at myself. And when
Man,
I started to look at
yeah.
myself, then I found out that actually, shit, it's a lot easier. That's why I say it's unbelievably simple, right?
It is.
It is
You're
unbelievably
absolutely
simple.
right. And what I'll tell you though is it's like it takes something, what these traumatic experiences, this trauma to happen to force you to do it. And it's in some ways, I mean, this has not been a fun situation, right? I mean, I wouldn't wish this last 9-10 years, well, I'd say, from the divorce, but even, I wouldn't wish this crap on anybody. But at the same time, I'm grateful that it happened, because if things would have been status quo and easy, I would still be like, for instance, there's a lot of times I'll say, had my ex just played it a little differently, threw me the bone that I needed to have when this whole thing started, I would still be in that nightmare, slowly dying and not even realizing it.
Yeah,
and
possibly, yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it's I'll see some people sometimes and they'll be like, oh, I'm too old, or I'm 50 or I'm 60 or I'm 40 or whatever, and they'll be like, I've lost the last 60 years. And I mean, for me, it was like 40 some odd years. I mean, I was married at 19. So, I mean, I was at the point where over almost, at half my life had been with this person. And instead of looking at it going, oh my God, I can't believe I wasted the last 2 decades of my life, I was grateful that, okay, so at least the next, whatever amount of time I have, if it's 10 years or 40 years would be nice, but, I doubt 90, but whatever. I mean, it's like every day out from underneath that is a new possibility. I just made a video, actually, it's going to drop here in a little bit, that about how in the past I was so anxious and worried about tomorrow, right? I mean, it was like I was constantly in fear. I mean, it was like I was constantly filled with anxiety. But now in my life, I'm excited about what's going to happen tomorrow, or what's going to happen in a month, or who I might meet, or, I mean, there's so many things that are still screwed up in my life that if I wanted to go down that dark path, I could, and I'd be perfectly justified to be as angry as I could be about it. But to be able to approach life and look at it, God, I mean, like with wonder. I mean, just like, oh, wow, what's going to happen next? And I mean, my health isn't great. I have issues. I have problems, I mean, but I'm at the point now where if I drop dead 5 minutes after this podcast is over, I don't think I would, venture off into the ether and be disappointed or, regret my life. I'm like, I would be grateful that I've had the last 9 years. Well, maybe not the first few of them, but that I've had this time to break free from this and to really find my peace. And it's, man, it's hard to explain, and I just hope that people can see that there's life after this crap.
Well, I don't know if you're particularly spiritual, or if you've ever gone down that avenue, but through my sort of my sort of mass YouTubing or what have you, there were some fantastic guru knowledges and philosophies that sat out there just about letting go and actually dealing with it. You sort of have this real stress and anxiety around attachments, right? You know, I like my mouse.
Oh, yeah.
I like my, you know, I like the stuff in the background, like, you know, your beautiful setting in the background, not so much mine. But you know, you have all of these attachments, and you fear letting go of, what if something ever happened to it? You know, what if, you know, and then they take you through this thing of like, you know, okay, you lose it, the house burns down, and so many people have this weird like release when trauma happens, when something tragic happens to them, and they lose everything, and they can kind of like, you know, there's this real sort of like deep breath of finding that didn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, and it gives you the opportunity to hit the reset button. You know, you get so caught up in your life and in the rat race, on the treadmill, I mean, whatever metaphor you want to use, that your life just passes you by. And these situations give you the opportunity. Well, I guess that's a positive way to look. I mean, it forces you to take, you know, hit the reset and say, okay, I get to choose what the hell I'm going to do tomorrow and who I'm going to engage with and what I'm going to try to do. Now, not completely, right? I mean, I think if I wasn't bound by the family court system to, you know, pay my ex $1 bazillion, you know, and I don't know, I'm not sure. I think in the UK, you guys have a much better system, but in the United States, whenever they assess what your bill is, you're going to pay it, and you don't get to come in and say, hey, you know what? I'm going through a midlife crisis, or I want to reevaluate my life. And, you know, instead of making $100,000 a year, I want to, you know, be a gardener and make $32,000 a year because I just want to be outside and whatever. They're going to say, okay, but you still have to pay, you know, so that means you're going to make 30, but you owe your ex 50. So you need to come up with another way to pay the extra money. Otherwise you're going to go to jail. I mean, so, you know, there probably, if I would have had the opportunity to where I didn't have that bill hanging over my head, I probably would have switched careers and downsized and, you know, whatnot. But I mean, even with that restriction, there's still a way to find a path through this and, you know, make the most of it. And you were mentioning something earlier about letting go. And I always have a hard time when I talk about that topic, because, you know, a lot of people will tell you in the beginning stage of this, and they'll just say, hey, you just need to let it go. You know, you just need to get over it. And they're not coming from a context of understanding the pain of your experience. Yeah. And I mean, in a lot of ways, they're right. You know, you have to get to the point that you can let go. But the problem is, sometimes it may take, like in my situation, it may take a couple of years of beating your head against the wall to where you finally realize that if you don't let it go, it will kill you. Yeah. It will destroy you.
Yeah. It's different, right? It's a different, I get annoyed by people saying, let it go. And I think to myself, no, there's got to be justice, right? There's got to be a responsibility.
But sometimes there isn't justice. Sometimes there's not responsibility. And you can chase that to the end of the earth and destroy yourself. Yeah. Or you can say, okay, I did everything I could to have justice, to have accountability, and I could either, you know, go down with this sinking ship, or I can get on a lifeboat, life raft, and try something different.
Yeah. So you've got to weigh up. You've got to weigh up yourself. You know, you've got to kind of, you know, you've got to, you know, you've got to get the balancing scales out on that as well.
But the reality is that, and this is probably what happened with you too, is fundamentally what happens is you wake up one day and you just let it go, and you're like, okay, I can't do this anymore. And you literally, it's like it's like a switch. I mean, and I'll tell you, there was a period of time where I was saying I can't do this anymore, and I would still every day do the same thing. But there's a shift. There comes a time whenever you really just hit the bottom.
Yeah. When you really believe it.
I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. I won't do it. I won't give that person that power over me. And it switches the way you think about it, right? So when someone says you just need to let it go, it's annoying because they don't understand the concept. Yeah. But the better way to say it would be like to say, man, you got to get to the point that you can let it go, that you realize you've done everything that you can. You've tried every way, and you're just tired of beating your head against the wall, and you realize that you can keep focusing your attention onto this toxic person, like, you know, it's almost like a drowning person.
I
It's
think that's a better way of putting it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a better way of putting it, because once you can sort of once you can differentiate between what it is you're letting go of. Are you letting
Yes.
go of this fight, or are
Yes.
you letting go of, you know, where it's taking you, you know?
Right.
And
Right.
and there's a difference between the two, because one is empowering the other person to be the king of the goblins, right?
Right. Exactly.
And the other is about you.
Exactly.
You know? So you can keep doing you until the cows come home. But what you might want to start letting go of are the things where you're fighting against, you know, these sort of like shadows. You're fighting shadows, you know, you're sort of chasing these you know, you're like the cat with the laser light, right? You know, you're trying to pour at these things that your toxic ex, I won't say she or he or what have you, but I probably have been throughout this video. But you know, like, yeah, there's a difference, isn't there, between what you're letting go of. So yeah, you know, you have to kind of like differentiate what it is that you're fighting for. Choose your battles, etc. That's
absolutely.
That's always a good place to go to.
Hard to get there though, man. It goes back to what you were talking about a minute ago, is that the answer is super simple, but getting to the point that you realize it is that's where all the work is.
Yeah.
It is so hard to realize, like we were saying, the example I was using before, so hard to realize the door's unlocked. Just push it open and there's a beautiful meadow on the other side of it. And it's just it's so simple, but it's so hard to get there.
Yeah. And when you do push the door, just forgive yourself for being so stupid that you didn't realize it earlier.
Oh, oh man, that's a great. I'll tell you, you know, the one of the things I try to address every so often in a video is this takes a long time, right? I mean, you know, people don't realize when you've been through a toxic, abusive childhood and a relationship that you don't just wake up one day and walk out the door and everything's great. It's a brutal process that may take, I think typically it takes 2 years. I think that the trend I've seen is 2 years of just complete crap to finally get to the point where you kind of wake up and you realize, oh wait, you know, the answer is simple. Some people do it in 6 months, some people take 5 years. And whatever your journey is, right? I mean, you know, it took me a couple of years. If it only took you 6 months, that's okay. If it takes me 5 years, you know, it's okay. Everyone's journey is different. The thing is that once you push to the other side and you get out of it, the payoff is that's amazing. I mean, it fundamentally changes your life in a positive way. And in a lot of ways, you probably if you're at the early stages of it, you don't even see how it could ever be positive, but it really can be, you know. I mean, and that's kind of the message I try to get out to people is just don't give up, you know, just keep plugging along, give yourself the time to heal, be easy on yourself, give yourself the space and the time to breathe, because one day you're gonna wake up out of this and realize, like you just were talking about a minute ago, about how simple the answer is, and I'll be like, holy crap, this is a lot simpler than I thought. So
if you really want to impact revenge on your ex, live well.
Well, I'll tell you, okay, sorry, I wasn't sure where you're going with that. And what I'll say on that is, at the beginning stages of this, that can be an enabler for you, right? It's like, you know what, I'm just going to, and this is kind of what I was talking about before when I was really angry. It's like, I'm going to get to the other side of this and I'm going to have a good life in spite of you, and you're going to see, right? But that's a bad mindset to be in, and nothing good comes from that. The real revenge, if you want to call this, is when you don't give a fuck anymore about what they think. And you're like, you know what? I don't care. You could win the lottery. I'm not going to be jealous. You could be living in a ditch. I don't care. You get to a point where it doesn't matter that revenge is, I don't even see. That's why when you said it, I kind of cringe, because to me, the idea of revenge is a negative, it's a negative karma almost.
Of course. I mean, I was using it in the most facetious way.
No, I get it. And it's funny you say that, because I've seen people say that, the best revenge is a life. And it's like, that rubs me the wrong way. But I'll tell you, 7 years ago, I was right there with you,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's just one of those semantic things that
that's right. It's full of semantic. About revenge. I mean, because the bottom line is the way I see that is, I have to, it takes into consideration a lot of nuance to
absolutely
live well. My interpretation of living well might be different to somebody else. Somebody else might think, oh, it's living on a beach with $1 million. Okay, that might be living
nice.
well because the other person's looking at me going, oh, I've lost that. I've lost that possibility that I was going to be with a millionaire on a beach. I don't mean it like that. I mean it like, you be happy, and your happiness is going to piss them off.
And the thing is that, and I get what you're saying, because at the beginning stages of it, that's what you want to do, is you want to rub it into them. You want to, figure out how to win the lottery and just be like, haha. And the reality is, if you have nothing except a yoga mat and a nice room that you feel calm and peace in, and if you feel happy and at peace in your life, then you've won. And they might look at you and go, haha, look at, they've lost everything. They don't have nothing. They have no one in their life, whatever. But it doesn't matter what they think.
That's right. You just know within yourself. So yeah, just find that happiness. Make your own decisions. I think Matthew McConaughey said it recently as well. It was like looking for what's his new book about, green lights. Just give yourself the go ahead. Don't ask anybody. Just give yourself the go ahead to make your decisions, to be happy, to set your own life out in front of you. Just take control of it. Don't worry about it. Yeah.
And enjoy the good and the bad. I mean, you have a good experience, that's great. If you have typically, even when you have a bad experience, there's something out of it that comes out of it that's a positive. You know what I mean? It's like, that's why I've gotten to the point now where when something happens, a lot of times, and if it could be perceived as bad, instead of getting really anxious and angry or scared or whatever, I'll just be like, well, that's interesting. I wonder where this is going to take, right? I mean, and it's like a completely different mindset that I, for the first 43, 45 years of my life, I wouldn't think that way. I would be like, oh my God, it's, what about, I would just be catastrophizing. Now it's like, all right, I'm not thrilled with this situation, but let's see where this is going to go.
See where it goes. Yeah,
and it's just a different mindset. And I tell you, man, had I not had this experience, I wouldn't be that person, I don't think.
That's absolutely true to say. It is trauma induced. I think, there's a real sort of, there's a real.
I hope your listeners get this, because I can just imagine some guys who randomly listen to this conversation have got to think, these two guys have lost their freaking mind. Stop smoking the peyote weed. Get back into reality.
I know, but hopefully, if there is anybody with like opposing views, I don't want to listen to my own little echo chamber, which is what I found myself in this realm of parental alienation and the family courts. And things like that. One of the things that I really want to do is break out of this bubble, because everybody I seem to talk to just agrees with me. Just so it's kind of like I want to hear from people who have a different point of view. I mean, I think we're fairly kind of there in it, because
I think the difference is that I think you and I both had those contrary views, right? So it's not like, we've spent our entire lifetime with this mindset. I think what anyone would say, saying we're nuts is something, roll the clock back, would probably be something that we would have said, I think. I mean, so it's weird, right? Because I'll get a comment every once in a while from somebody who says something, and it's kind of, it's almost like a trolley comment, or it's a big poke in my eye, and I'll look at it and I don't get angry at it. I'm like, man, I remember when I thought that, I mean, And I'll try to, sometimes I'm successful. Sometimes I can bridge that gap to say, hey, and try to pull them along. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But a lot of times when people say stuff, I'm like, oh man, I remember feeling that way. I remember saying those exact same things. I mean, I wouldn't leave trolly comments, but I mean, I do remember feeling the same way. So I think that's the difference with us, is that we've experienced this, and we've gone through the different mindsets to get to where we are now. Then you take somebody like Matthew McConaughey, who I think had that approach of life probably when he was in his 20s, maybe even younger, and he was able to live his entire life. And look at his success. I mean, as a result of that and his approach, that it took like me in my late 40s to get to, if you had that mindset at 20 or 15 or whatever, I mean, and you're able to have that empowerment, I mean, your life is going to go a different way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So. No, look, that's absolutely true. I think one of the things, obviously you had your childhood, and then I sort of critiqued my childhood as having parents who were too kind, and that might sound a bit strange, but there was things like having a father who could sit down and talk to you and give you the kind of, the sort of, this is what's going to happen. This is what life is like. This is what life is going to be about. Life is suffering. You need to find the important things and cherish those, those sort of like words that I only now know through this trauma were missed. Were missed as a childhood. I was sheltered from the suffering, because I just saw this bliss. I saw that door was already open, and I was in the meadow.
Yeah, but I think that I hear what you're saying on that, but I think the problem is you have to have a balance of it, right? I mean, it's like, okay, so you had a really good, situation, and you didn't see the dark side. I had the dark side and I didn't see the good side, but at the same time, it's like you need to have a conversation and let your kids know that you have to have good boundaries, that you have to be on the lookout for are things too good to be true? Is somebody really, are they mirroring you, or are they just telling you what you want? I mean, are you being conned, right? Like a con job. I mean, it's kind of what happens is, I mean, on a different scale, it's not like they're trying to steal a business or a car or your cat. I mean, I guess technically they do kind of do all that, but I mean, it's more subversive, right? So yeah,
and it's and it's weird. But listen, look, I think you're absolutely right. But we are now well into the depths of this conversation. But I think that it's been fascinating. It's been really, I didn't know what to expect when talking to you. As I said before, it's unscripted. But I've had a fantastic conversation with you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we sort of close up?
No, I just say first, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed this conversation. I mean, it was kind of, we bobbed and weaved, or weaved and bobbed, or whatever, around a bunch of different topics. But I think I'll just kind of dovetail on something you mentioned earlier. And that's if you got to give yourself not a pass, but don't be so damn hard on yourself for whatever the situation is. If you spent 50 years of your life making a bad decision, and today you wake up and you're like, I want to try something new, don't beat yourself up for yesterday. Make the changes that you possibly can, and try to make the best tomorrow that you possibly can, and just realize that there's definitely better times ahead, I guess, if that's the way I would summarize it.
Duane Robert, thank you very much for taking part in the Philip Maloney podcast.
Thanks, man.
On a train, in a bus, in a car, on the way to your job. All alone with your kids, with your wife, or with your dog. You can listen anywhere, you can listen everywhere, to the Philip Maloney podcast.